This is a Counterspin Media presentation. Presenting the Samantha Edwards Report.
Smart cities, the way of the future. Clean, green, and so convenient. Everything just right there in the palm of your hand. You may know them by the name of 20-minute neighbourhoods or 20-minute cities. 15-minute cities. Sorry, it changed a while back. Oh, okay, 10-minute cities. Right, okay, wait, what? You gotta be kidding me. 5-minute cities? Well, this is changing really fast. I don't like this. What are they gonna be like? And where are they gonna be? Especially here in New Zealand. Well, I can tell you, it's not just gonna be Hamilton, and it's not just gonna be Wellington, and it's not just going to be Christchurch, because New Zealand is the first country in the whole world to have every one of its city councils signed up to the Smart City scheme. Yay! So it's time we learn what they're truly about, because they're coming in like a flood. Through more and more geoengineered weather disasters and the false climate change narrative, we are about to be ushered into the age of managed retreat, into resilient and sustainable cities, the age of globalist tyranny like never before. I know this video is quite long, but there's information we need to know about what the reality of smart cities is. And even in this time frame, I'll barely be able to skim the surface.
You're in coalition with the far right.
I can tell you one thing, your government certainly doesn't intend on discussing the truth about smart cities with you. They couldn't give a toss about full disclosure or getting your consent for any of it. In fact, they know that if you knew the reality, you'd do all you could do to prevent it. So, seeing they don't want to give us the truth, let's go have a look for ourselves, shall we?
Questions loom over who will foot the bill of New Zealand's climate adaptation plan. The government's unveiled a framework for dealing with the impact of rising seas, increasing heat and extreme weather. It will outline plans for abandoning areas no longer safe to live in and a funding model for the transition.
Co-leader of the Green Party, James Shaw, has recently presented what's called the Climate Adaptation Plan. He said that he hopes it will become legislated within the next few months. A major focus of the Climate Adaptation Plan, also known as the National Adaptation Plan, is what's been called managed retreat. This is the term that's been given to the plan to relocate rural dwellers to smart city locations.
And so one of the things in the adaptation plan is that we're going to become more directive about where we're able to build in the future.
Extensive Resource Management Act reform is underway in New Zealand, and James Shaw tells us that managed retreat laws will extend this reform much further. He says that these changes will affect up to 50% of New Zealanders, in particular those who live on or near the coast. These laws will not only apply to future building, but also to existing homes and businesses. After the devastating Cyclone Gabrielle hit our nation, Jack Tame talked with Grant Robertson on NZ Q&A. Unusually, Mr. Robertson didn't seem too interested in talking about emissions reductions this time, as it appears that that phrase is very much last year. But what he did seem far more excited to talk about was the subject of resilient cities and managed retreat.
There's two words New Zealanders are going to get used to hearing over the next few years is managed retreat. We have to understand where communities can be made more resilient, where we can do things to the infrastructure so they can stay where they are, and other communities and neighbourhoods where actually we have to accept it's no longer appropriate.
And now we're promised even more extensive resource management system reform via the Severe Weather Emergency Recovery Legislation Bill, which is also on its way.
I move that the Severe Weather Emergency Recovery Legislation Bill be now read a first time. I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by the 5th of April 2023.
This bill will grant emergency powers to the government to determine a weather event as a severe emergency and then take whatever actions they deem necessary in response to that emergency. like COVID emergency powers, but this time pertaining to weather. Immediately after the cyclone hit Hawke's Bay, James Shaw's message was given centre stage. The very next day, he delivered an emotive speech to Parliament about how we must hasten the climate adaptation plan into legislation, complete with a skillfully inserted Jacinda-style manipulation in regards to the NRA.
I have to say that as I stand here today, I struggle to find words to express what I am thinking and feeling about this particular crisis. I don't think I've ever felt as sad or as angry about the lost decades that we spent bickering and arguing about whether climate change was real or not, whether it was caused by humans or not, whether it was bad or not, whether we should do something about it or not, because it is clearly here now. And if we do not act, it will get worse. I have to say, I've been recalling actually a quote from a different time about a different crisis. The era of procrastinations, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to its close. In its place, we are entering a period of consequences. And there will be people who say, you know, just as the National Rifle Association in the United States does about shootings over there, it's too soon to talk about these things, but we are standing in it right now. This is a climate change related event. We need to stop making excuses for inaction. We cannot put our heads in the sand when the beach is flooding. We must act now.
Wow, such bold statements from a man who has a business background but is far from a climate scientist. Personally, I believe the reason that he made such a glaringly deliberate comment about the NRA and pushing towards the disarming of America, because let's face it, that's what that's all about, is because James Shaw is an absolute New Zealand poster boy for the globalist agenda and for UN agendas specifically. As is revealed on his LinkedIn profile, he's been a consultant for the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, Bayer Pharmaceuticals. He worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers, a company which has proven to be invaluable in the creating of wealth, but only for the already wealthy, by extracting it from the underlying economy. And he also worked as the president of AIE SEC-NZ, as well as Victoria, and is still on the advisory board today. This is a non-governmental organisation in consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and is an independent arm of the UN Department of Public Information and the UN's Office of the Secretary-General's Envoy on Youth. So as you can see, this man is not a greenie. He's a globalist. He's not working for you. It's nothing but a facade that he's trying to protect you from the climate through this brilliant idea of managed retreat. And this is not even a Green Party idea. The term managed retreat is a term first introduced by, believe it or not, the World Economic Forum. It's their idea, and just like all their other policies, the leaders of the world are obeying its requirements at whatever the cost. There are many articles on their forum that speak about managed retreat. New Zealand even had a starring role in one of them recently, soon after Cyclone Gabrielle. It didn't take the World Economic Forum long at all to turn what happened in Hawke's Bay into a stirring and cinematic piece of propaganda. Apparently, the residents of Hawke's Bay are under threat from rising seas. As always, not a shred of actual proof is provided to back up this claim. A cyclone and a flood is a completely different issue than rising sea levels. See how they blatantly manipulate the truth? What a load of garbage. I know people who live in Napier and they can say with certainty that the sea is right where it's always been. Now, nations all over the world are executing managed retreats, always presenting it as if it's a response thought up by that nation's own government, when it's nothing more than a corporate globalist scheme being executed all over the world for globalist purposes. Managed retreat is simply the mechanism being used to move people into resilient cities. But what is a resilient city? I mean, I appreciate the Wellington City Council telling us that Resilient Cities Network is owned by the deeply corrupt Rockefeller Foundation, but why is this lady holding up a sign that pushes globalist ideology? I mean, wouldn't managed retreat into resilient cities be more about things like, I don't know, raised housing to protect from floods and earthquake-proof buildings? Well, apparently no, because a resilient city is a smart city. They're one and the same. A city that's digitally empowered to survive, adapt and thrive. Whatever. It's got nothing to do with surviving, thriving, resilience. Nothing at all. It's a pack of lies. Take a look at any smart city technology and you'll see that they're all about surveillance, tracking, and facilitating future lockdowns and controlling humanity. Smart city technologies are not about the environment. And getting you within the confines of a smart city through managed retreat, ushered in by geoengineered weather events, is being cloaked as protecting you from the climate, protection of the climate, and also about your convenience. But it's all one giant scam. Let's take a little skim through this article about managed retreat from the New Zealand Herald a couple of weeks after Cyclone Gabrielle. A top Kiwi environmental planner, Christina Hanna, says she prefers the term remaking of space, which is another buzz phrase for this scheme. They love re-words, it seems, like remaking, reimagining, rethinking, resilience, retreat, relocate, reset. Basically redoing everything and removing human rights in the process. Anyway, as it explains here, managed retreat will involve buyouts, land swaps, rebuild restrictions, land use control, and compulsory property acquisitions, aka government theft of property. And don't you just love the arrogant way they describe dislocating people from their land as challenging? And how they describe this as something that the people are asking for because of climate change. Then they double down on their manipulation, giving us a random example of how Maori are the example for us here, because back in 1850, there was a chief who shifted his people because of a flood. Just to clarify, we are not asking for managed retreat or smart cities. That's a lie. In fact, it's quite the opposite. People all over the world are vehemently expressing their opposition, actually, and being completely overridden by globalist controlled governments. There's token references here about how Maori may have their rights upheld, but not a single mention of Pākehā having any rights whatsoever. I'm not sure that that's not just a little racist. And then at the end of the article, it tells us that James Shaw's climate adaptation plan is going to take care of the details of it all. No public consultation will be necessary here. And then it finishes with saying, this propaganda has been brought to you by the New Zealand government, basically, by revealing how this woman is funded extensively by the government to say what they tell her to say. That's how science works, apparently. Truth, money, truth, money. And did you know, as it states here on this article on the Smart Cities World website, New Zealand's actually the first nation in the whole world to have all its local councils join the Smart Cities Council. So it's not a matter of which of our cities are going to be developed into smart cities. Apparently, we're going to be an entire country of smart cities, whether we like it or not. It's all in keeping with our WEF AI pilot project nation status and its clear description of how New Zealand is going to be used as a pioneering nation for the new era of AI technologies, particularly tracking and surveillance and all its corresponding legislations. These white papers here describe what they call soft laws and also hard laws, and also enforcement of new AI procedures and policies. It talks about how punitive measures should be taken against those who don't comply, with every aspect of their lives being monitored, reported and controlled by means of electronic surveillance. Despite what you may hear from our globalist government, managed retreat is nothing more than the term assigned to a worldwide operation of monumental magnitude to initiate the globalist agenda of herding the masses into small and controlled zones. These zones will be more effective in their control if they're away from the coast. The coastlines present many threats to this agenda: access to food from the sea, water that could be desalinated, as well as entry and exit points which would be difficult to police. A coastline that's been cleansed of peasants would free up the elites to bring in and out whatever they choose to, without the knowledge of those peasants and their annoying objections. I imagine the coast would also be prime real estate for the elites, especially once things are in place and the geoengineering can cease and the climate change facade can finally be dropped. These new safe and protected areas are being presented as smart cities. But just as the term managed retreat is a form of neuro-linguistic programming, so is the term smart city. The term managed retreat is a fear mechanism to imply that an enemy is approaching, in this case, nature. And they will manage the situation for us via smart cities because it's too much for us to be able to survive on our own. And the term smart city is just quite simply a lie. It has nothing to do with superior technology being harnessed for our benefit. It has nothing to do with ease and convenience, well-being, and the advancement of humanity. And it's not going to look anything like the brochures. In fact, if they were to print an honest brochure, it would probably look a lot more like these images that I included in my video on the Shanghai COVID response. It showed how drones and robots patrolled the streets and millions of people were forced into multiple enormous human warehouses with lights that stayed on 24 hours a day, jail cell-like housing, barely any bathroom facilities, leaking roofs, seas of stretchers and bunk beds, people begging for food, filth, rubbish everywhere. They were like scenes straight out of a dystopian horror movie. But the globalist leaders of the West were united in their praise of China's response, saying, it's the level the West needs to strive for. That should tell you something. There was a huge amount of drones used to control the people in China too, not only for surveillance of movement, but also to bring about starvation. Thousands of tons of food was dumped and destroyed as drones would hover over trucks full of food, blaring out demands that they dump their produce outside the city, telling them they were being recorded. And speaking of drones, the Australian military released a video a few weeks ago, February 23, showing robot dogs designed to be able to subdue humans that are now able to be controlled by the minds of their operators. Here they are walking the streets of Washington, D.C. Now, because of the UN's and the World Health Organization's and other Western leaders' positive response to China's actions, I tend to believe that this dystopian AI police environment is more likely to be the reality of smart cities than the utopian picture we're being presented with. All around the world, technologies are already being installed to try and force you to comply with the coming digital system for your very survival.
Walmart, Rockland, Ontario. Look what they're installing. The sensors are in, fellas. This section here, there's no doors. They've just installed doors. And they have sensors everywhere. Look. Sensors going right there. See?
Food, water, shelter, freedom of movement will no longer be human rights under this system, but instead only given to those who submit.
Check, I'll show you the... There. See? There's a beep-boop machine. You don't do beep-boop, door don't open. Most people don't know what's coming.
These are facial recognition cameras and will only allow the door to open once identification's been obtained. Here's another supermarket.
All this is cameras for when they're here. In front of the meat section. And here in the egg department, all along.
These are popping up all throughout Northern America. Doors installed where there used to be none, with facial recognition cameras mounted above them.
Since these doors went up, these cameras are here. They're all over the place.